You're listening to INTERZONE Pod. My name is Gareth Jelley. I'm the editor of INTERZONE, and today I'm talking to Eliane Boey. Hello, Eliane. Thank you very much for coming on and talking to me today.
Hello, thank you very much for having me.
I wanted to start just by kind of helping listeners to know a bit more about you. And I wondered sort of when in your own story from, Singapore to the University of St. Andrews to New York and then back to Singapore, when in that kind of sort of story did you first think about writing?
Oh, well, I suppose, as with a lot of writers' answers, that happened way before, like in primary school. I didn't do very well in primary school at all. Back then, there was either no testing for attention capabilities, just to put it that way, or there were social stigmas against doing that. And well, I wasn't tested, but I had strong inabilities to pay attention to any class except for English, specifically just to write essays, which I would write in excess of the 500 words allowed or whatever it was. And so that was when I knew I loved writing. And we had fax machines in that time, although I hope I'm not giving away too much about my age, but my father was in shipping, so we had fax machines for a long time.
Okay.
To communicate with ships. And at least two other of my classmates had them, and we used to complete stories together by faxing them around. And that was how we spent quite a lot of afternoons. So I always knew that I wanted to write, but as the first of my side of the family to have the chance to go to university and such, it was not a very reasonable option. So I just never gave it any thought, and I shut it aside and went along with going to uni. I began studying business, actually, and philosophy came after that. It was sort of a treat to self, having done the grind and got the job and the internship and such. It was just before the pandemic, actually, when a new company I joined started to fall apart, and to sort of comfort myself, I started writing a short story. And this was also shortly after my daughter was born. So there were a few other emotions in that mix. And as luck would have it, the company I was working for fell apart just as the pandemic began. And so now there was no excuse not to write because there was literally nothing else to do. And so I started. And I suppose that's history. But I did not start writing science fiction, actually. In fact, I didn't even grow up reading much science fiction. Not in a focused fan-like way. I tried to write what is sometimes called literary fiction. I wrote 2 books, which I have since decided that nobody deserves the torture of having to read. And I wrote a few short stories. I was very lucky that the Mekong Review, which was led by Min Bui Jones at the time, acquired my first story, which really, really was what showed me that writing was something that I could try. And then shortly after that, it was my first story with Clarkesworld, The Forgotten. And I suppose that's how I got started in science fiction. And science fiction just really opened my mind to it, because all of a sudden I realized that a lot of the thoughts that I'd been having, and they're not many, they're not very intense, but they were just, I suppose, unspoken from university, from having studied philosophy and then having failed to go further with it, just came out. And Signal Tracer was that trigger. And so I'm very thankful for having had that opportunity.
That's a fascinating. Lots of things I want to pick up on there. I mean, okay. The reading you mentioned, kind of as you weren't reading a lot of, SF when you were younger. What were you reading? What were you kind of interested in?
It was pretty random. I started off reading abridged classics because that was simply what my parents made available at the time, pre-internet and such. So I read those. I had huge sets of great illustrated classics and Penguin abridged classics as such. And then we were fortunate enough to live across from a private lending library, and then I read a lot of what sold well at the time, like legal thrillers, spy thrillers, and such. And so yeah, that's what I grew up reading. So I probably the only SF books that I read at the time were maybe H.G. Wells. So it's quite a gap that I'm filling in now. Of course, I'm starting with the more contemporary novels because everyone's writing so many awesome books right now, and there's almost no time to go back into the backlist.
But that's really interesting about the about kind of reading what was available. I've heard that from from different writers, and I can completely kind of appreciate the sort of like picking up the legal thrillers or the the spy books or the techno thrillers or whatever's lying around, because for me it was on holidays or neighbors or just grabbing things off random shelves. And yeah, I think that's a really interesting way to read, because it does wire you in a different way. It kind of wires your brain, I guess, in a different way to what kind of makes a story tick.
Yeah, and I think, well, I'm not sure if I can be held to it because it's just my experience, but I think it probably also has a bit to do with being in this side of the world, in Southeast Asia. And the books that one gets, at least, back then, I won't say when, but back then, were just what the big supply stock would sell. So yes, you get a lot of legal thrillers, you get the techno thrillers, and also it's possible that in Southeast Asia there was also more of a desire to work on your English or such, and so that's why there were a lot of classics when I was growing up, and it was encouraged to read classics, abridged classics for children, etc. So yes, that was what was available, and that was what shaped my interest in writing.
I also, you mentioned faxing stories back and forth, and that seems sort of beautifully fragmented.
Yes.
I used to sort of classroom teach and part writing or sort of story writing that way in a classroom is great fun, but I imagine with the extra layer of waiting to see what the next person's going to fax back to you is really exciting. So yeah, I mean that's a great way to put a story together.
Yes, we did it in class, of course, at the risk of getting caught. But it's a fax machine was so interesting also because the ink fades after, I can't remember now, after 2 months or so, maybe a bit longer than that. So it's fun. So you're writing literary, it a lot of fun. You could doodle all over it as well. You could illustrate the stories.
And you said your father was involved in shipping, so there was the sort of presence of there was that kind of presence around you as well. And obviously, in this book, in Other Minds, that's a big part of Carrier, and I guess of your work. From what I can gather from your work now,
Mm-hmm.
how did those other aspects of your childhood sort of feed into some of the stories you're creating now?
Well, I suppose many good stories have a bit of a trauma in them, and not to say that I am my characters and I live their life, but in Signal Tracer as well as in Carrier, there are subplots of mother and daughters misunderstanding each other, which is something that one, of course, elaborates and colors in a lot more for drama. But I think that that's one thing that has added to the inspiration. In Signal Tracer, the mother is trying to write and trying to be present at the same time, and that's not at all something that I lived as a child, but it's in fact closer to what I went through as a young mother at that time when I first started to write, and I was trying to rearrange my own priorities and be present. So I don't know if that answers the question. Carrier, yes, Carrier is very much influenced by by naval architecture, actually. So, because I don't know anything, I don't know the first and the last thing about spaceships. And if you notice, I simply just use nautical terms and insist they stick. So, I followed my father into shipping. So philosophy was not used at all. I followed him to shipping, and so Carrier in a way is inspired by some real life incidents, not in the exact, of course, as well as some real life ambitions to try and overcome nature, to build the biggest, the best, and to overcome our limitations. And that's essentially what both Carrier and Signal Tracer are about. It's about the arrogance of construction. I'm sorry, I was supposed to talk about my childhood. Yes.
That's a really interesting link, though, from your childhood to the arrogance of construction. That's I'll let listeners fill in whatever gaps they want to fill in.
Okay.
There seems to me to be a lot of Singapore in your work. That sort of there's sort of generally, I think in the work of yours I've read, you have a great kind of attention to sort of place or the details of place. There's this moment in Signal Tracer with the burger stand, and that they sell cigarettes by the stick, which is a lovely little sort of observation. And I wonder kind of, what is it like living in Singapore and writing in Singapore?
What's it like living here? Well, it's a nice little town. I like it. Writing Singapore was something that I have been trying through my very short writing so-called career, of course, I suppose, to navigate. Initially, when I tried to write literary fiction, it was very heavily set in Singapore, very heavily locally colored. Science fiction, what I like about science fiction, or at least the way that I try to write it, it gives me the chance to both be local and specific, as well as I suppose literally completely out of this world. So there are actually parts of Signal Tracer which is someone who doesn't live in Singapore might think is Singapore, and they might not be. So actually, the street names are not Singaporean at all. They're a mixture of stuff that I made up and some Hong Kong street names. But what I liked, doing it in it, I don't think it was particularly clever. I just thought it was something interesting to do. Was to create a place that seemed familiar in some way to people who have lived here, and also seemed recognizable to people who have not. But actually, SE3 does not really exist, and SE3 also exists in a post-national society, post-national international framework, I suppose, where nations have decided to that nationalism has become so dangerous that they set it aside for commercial and long-term survival. So, but yes, I am nevertheless Singaporean, and I do enjoy coloring in parts of the story with those details. And Signal Tracer is the one that has most of that flavor, especially because Lion City and its sensory detail and such dips into the value, the comforting value of nostalgia. So a lot of it is very specific in that sense.
Mm-hmm. We'll come back to the kind of nostalgia, I guess, tangentially later. But the Paul McAuley notes in his review in INTERZONE Digital that Carrier has a tantalizing open ending. And you've said in interviews that you see it as a hopeful story and a story of redemption. I kind of wonder, without straying into spoilers, okay, could you talk a little bit about the character Li Mingwen and how she came to be, and who she is in that story?
Mingwen is a builder who believes that anything can be built almost to overcome the challenges of the firm, of society, or the needs of commerce, etc. And she's very committed to what she does, and she was very torn up by an accident which she was responsible for, or held responsible for, that almost ended her career. So that's where Carrier begins, and Carrier, the construction of the ship in Carrier is her comeback and her chance at redemption, reclaiming her professional standing, but as well as by bringing her daughter on board to observe the flight. No spoilers. It's her chance to rebuild her relationship with her daughter. So Ming-Wen starts off in this story trying to assert herself through all aspects of through everything she's constructed, as well as through flashbacks. You see that she tries to assert herself in the nurturing of her daughter. But what readers might then experience is the ship exerts itself back on her through replaying of her memories and the way things are remembered correctly or incorrectly in a possibly haunting way. So that's Ming-Wen. I don't know if I do this a lot because I've not written that much, but I do enjoy writing characters who are neither antagonists nor heroic, and I think I personally find that interesting. And so Ming-Wen is neither. She's neither a baddie nor a hero. Although one could say that she is heroic towards the end, because she does. There is hubris, and she does recognize what has to be done. And I should probably stop talking before I give it entirely away.
Okay. Going back to the nostalgia and the past, there are kind of images in Carrier. There are these photo books of scenes taken on Earth a century ago, and there's in other stories you've written, there are, in the last Gold single, there's there are memories, there's guilt, there's hunger and the past in your fantastic sort of weird horror story Hunger. And in the dedication to other minds, you write really powerfully, I hope to live up to your memories. And there's this sort of fascinating sort of, for me at least, this theme running through your stories of, the way the kind of the pressure the past exerts on the present. And I wonder how much you sort of connect with that idea as a reader or as a writer.
Yes, I suppose I've always found memory to be very very intriguing. Although of course I'm very aware that it's not particularly unique to what I write. It's something that's addressed a lot in science fiction and outside of it. I like how one recurring theme through a lot of stories, not just what I write, but recent novels and such, is how you are nothing but your memories, and if you change that, what are you change? You might possibly change your present self. So that is part of what triggers that theme in both stories. In Signal Tracer, memory and nostalgia are meant to be a little more sinister, because nostalgia is the new drug for the masses,
Mm-hmm.
who are unable to cope with the way that society has changed, and the way that it has no place for them. It appears to have no place for them. And I think I've said in some before that this nostalgia and yearning is a sign that is a sign of rising conservatism, of people wishing that things were better again, according to what they thought it was, that things were simpler, and it might not have been. It might have had its own challenges, and it might have been very difficult, and very grotty and not rose tinted at all. But quite often people choose to remember it that way, because they feel disempowered to change their present, which is ironic because that is the only thing. The future is the only thing that you can change at this point. But they feel they are powerless to do that. So all they can do is edit their memories. We do that now, even without even without interfaces and and technology to do that yet. Although who knows what Meta might do soon. But yes, so with nostalgia, they feel that by revisiting their memories and editing their memories and saying, I'm pretty sure it was like this, I don't think it was this way, things were better then. It is a retreat, it is a comfort, and it is in a way to avoid the reality of what they can and cannot do. And so part of the arc and signal tracer is to overcome that and realize that the changes, as corny as it sounds, but change happens now for the future and not backwards.
Right. You're writing science fiction now, and as you said earlier, you started out writing kind of literary fiction and not so much inside that particular genre. Are there other spaces, other genres you feel drawn to as a writer? I know from your kind of Twitter, or sorry, X, formerly known as Twitter, that you read Le Carré. You mentioned Michael Crichton in the Paul Samuel interview, and I wonder, are there outside of this genre, are there other kind of places other kind of areas you'd like to write in?
Yes, I would love to write a good old spy thriller that would bring together a lot of things that had just have been, probably overboiling in my mind. So that's next on my mind for next year. Hopefully, can bring it to reality. Michael Crichton is a force. I love Sphere. I love Sphere so much, and I love Dennis Lehane, and was a lot of his gangland and crime fiction. That is also good fun, and there is a fair bit of contemporary crime fiction that I love reading as well. Another influence is Patricia Highsmith. I love her mysteries. I love how they're so subtle and bloodless. But although sometimes, writing in this day, I feel a bit of I don't know if it's guilt or insecurity, but I'm quite aware that a lot of the stuff that I write is bloodless, and I wonder how that fits in with the more contemporary need for drama and action. But yes, though, to answer the question properly, those are my non-SF interests. Although I personally don't really see them as being in SF or not. They're just stories that can be terrestrial or otherwise, or in the future or in the past.
In your interview with Paul Samuel, you mentioned the film adaptation of Sphere, which terrified you. And then you also mentioned going back to the Crichton novel, and you mentioned going back to it for craft. And that's really interesting. I kind of wonder, what is it about that book, or Crichton maybe generally, that kind of, appeals to that part of your brain?
Okay, well, I'm looking at it now, and mine's all yellow and flagged and dog-eared because, I'm a monster and I dog-ear my books. But Crichton just writes so tight, and it almost reads like a script. There's nothing that is accessed. The exposition is sort of slipped into the dialogue. It doesn't feel heavy-handed, at least not for Sphere. I think I recently read Rising Sun, and that was a bit of hit and miss. But although it was great in the first half, but Sphere is just, it's, the tension is perfect. And another thing I love about Sphere, which I brought directly to my own writing, was how everything was in very short chapters. I think each chapter is about 4 or 5 pages, and each chapter is also titled. And that gives, that sort of reinforces with regards to current teaching on how to write an engaging thriller. It reinforces purpose. Like every scene has a purpose. Every scene has some fear or some desire that is either met or or I don't know, run away from or left for the next scene, but there is some guiding purpose and need for every scene. And I feel that Crichton's labeling of each scene as a chapter really helps that. And there's actually a lot of dialogue in Sphere, but it never feels too heavy.
With the chapter titles or the scene titles, did they? I mean, those run through other minds through both novellas. Were they always the same, or did you kind of tweak them and change them, and sort of retrospectively decide that's the wrong title there? Because I feel like they are very. I mean, no, not I feel like they are very important.
I do tweak them, but they are pretty much what I started off with because, I remember you asked a question which I forgot to answer, which was how did I work Carrier from short form into long form? Yes, and so the chapter titles are quite a key for me because Carrier started off as a short story and Signal Tracer was a short story that was The Forgotten in Clarkesworld. And so both of them grew just on the fly or pantsed, as people say. So both of them just grew on the page without much planning. And it was the chapter titles that are sort of like the wireframe for that. So I didn't change the chapter titles much because they are supposed to reflect what happens in the plot. I suppose I changed it to just make them more punchy, and there were points when I repeated the title. But no, they're very useful for me in that way. And if anybody needs a free tip that they didn't ask for, I find that the chapter titles are also very useful when you're trying to write a novel. So even when you're writing like 90,000 words or something, I still keep to short chapters or chapter titles because that helps me write the synopsis later.
Oh, okay.
Because it keeps track of what happens. Yes. So if anyone needs a free tip, that's it. That they didn't ask for.
You mentioned John le Carré and Patricia Highsmith, and I wonder what other writers, not necessarily genre writers, just generally, what other writers are kind of writers you go back to a lot?
Yeah, Dennis Lehane for one, and okay, now I'm trying to think. Oh dear.
Sorry.
Yes.
Trick question.
Yeah, trick question. John Grisham. John Grisham is not very deeply, I would say, he's not very deeply etched in my memory because it's been so long since I've read him. I mean, I was in primary school sitting on the floor of this private rental library, which I wonder if it was just a thing out here in Southeast Asia and in South Asia as well. But there used to be a lot of these private libraries where you would pay half the price of the book.
Oh.
And and you borrow the book and you have the option of not returning it and then your money's forgone. Or you return it and you get X, I don't know, $2 back or something or whatever. And you put that towards borrowing another book, which is great because at that time, our public libraries, although they were really good and the real boon, they didn't have so many contemporary novels. They had more reference novels because obviously this was pre-internet. They had more reference material because this was pre-internet. And they had children's fiction. So there was not a lot for primary schoolers and secondary schoolers to read at their level. So these private libraries were just so useful. So anyway, the point was that was where I read John Grisham and Michael Crichton, but mostly John Grisham. I read a lot of that. So probably some of his work has made its way into my mind, although I can't quite put my finger on it. Dennis Lehane is a contemporary writer that I greatly admire for his style. His latest was Small Mercies, which is just great. It's just brilliant. And Shutter Island is one book, which is not so recent. I think it's from the early 2000s. I love that book as well. That is another book which sort of sits across genres. It's horror. It is a bit of SF, if you consider it in the psychological techno thriller. And it's also a period piece, I suppose. And I love the fragmented writing of it. So, yeah, that's another. And I suppose behind me on the shelf, there's there's Ken Liu, there's Somerset Maugham. So it's all over the place. The point is, I try to read as much as I can. Yeah, try to read nearly everything.
Now that's really fascinating. Yeah. Going back to Other Minds, your book, it's available from darkmattermagazine.shop and from wherever books are sold. And I wonder, it's a couple of weeks now since it came out. How does it feel seeing it out in the world? How does it feel sort of knowing that this book that you put so much work into is now in multiple countries in readers' hands?
Well, it feels very unreal. It feels very unreal. Every time that someone posts a picture with my book, which, please do if you have it. Okay, I love seeing them, especially being all the way here on the other side of the world. I can't imagine that people are choosing to spend their time reading something that I wrote, and I'm really grateful for that, and thank you so much for taking that time to read it. They're both very special to me, although I think I'll probably say that about anything that I write. But Carrier especially. Carrier was almost literally written in a fever dream when I sort of had COVID, but it turned out negative, but I'm pretty sure it was it. And that was Carrier. It came out of that. Yes, I am very happy that it's out there in the world and that people are reading it and saying what they will of it. I am looking forward to seeing it in bookshops in the US and in the UK. I hope it's available. If not, yes, it's always available online. And I suppose I should make a little plug right now because Dark Matter Inc. has a Halloween special and the ebooks are on discount. But the physical books are always available too. So do pick that up for a bit of tangible ownership. Yes.
You have another book on the horizon called Club Contango. And this is, you wrote in your email to me, a space set neo-noir thriller. What can you tell INTERZONE listeners about that one?
Club Contango is about a single mom on a space station who runs an illegal micro casino with a best friend. And things go awry when her former associate shows up dead, as a matter of speaking. And she's confronted by some small print on what she thought was a simple AI trading job that she did in a moment of desperation that now comes back at her. And she finds herself implicated in it and has to reclaim her life and prove her innocence against versions of herself without giving away too much of it.
Okay.
That was a very long elevator pitch. But Club Contango is hopefully a fun mystery and also a story about female friendship and also trying to survive in an economy that has a driving purpose of making one irrelevant and disenfranchising one's skills from the person. So yes, I suppose that is the punch at the end. Just when you thought it was fun, it brings in a bit of I suppose what has been stewing in my mind over labor action and as well as worker alienation in this economy, especially now that we're all working from home and we're increasingly separated from our work. But it's fun. I hope you enjoy it. It's fun. I'm editing it now, so yeah, it's coming into shape.
That does sound fun, and that's coming out 2024.
Yes, in November.
And so Dark Matter. There's a Halloween sale on the ebooks, and you can buy Other Minds in print or EPUB from them. And I just sort of wrapping it up, I wanted to ask you, like what are you reading at the moment, and is there anything you'd like to recommend or kind of give a boost to?
What am I reading? Oh, so many things. Oh, I'm Oh, okay, what am I reading? I'm reading Convergence Problems, which is an arc. I love it. I really love this collection of short stories by Talabi. I really hope I'm not butchering his name, but it's excellent. I love it so much. And I've also recently finished his Shigidi, which is it's just great. It's great on so many levels, and it's you can read it just as a mystery, but of course it's got deeper things to say about colonization of culture, and so that's something that I've read recently that I love. Right now I'm reading The Surviving Sky. I'm reading. I'm supposed to start City of Last Chances. And I'm really looking forward to that. I'm also reading Zakari's Russia House because I'm trying to work through his backlist, and there's so much to read. But other books that I've read recently, I've read Emergent Properties by Amy Ogden, and that's really great. Yeah, and oh yes, and Samit Basu has the Gin Bot out, which out 2 days ago. That is an excellent book. You should definitely get your hands on it. The City Inside was brilliant, and this is even more fun. And as in his usual style, with a lot of things to say about power structures, urban power structures. So definitely get your hands on that. And I can probably think of even more books if I keep looking around my shelves.
Thank you very much for all of those. Thank you very much for coming on the show, and yeah, I hope Other Minds does really well, and yeah, I hope you can come on again later when you have the next one out. That would be fantastic.
Thank you. I hope you won't have to edit too much of this, but yes, thank you so much for having me.
You've been listening to INTERZONE Pod. My name is Gareth Jelley, and today I was talking to Eliane Boey. Find out more about INTERZONE at interzone.press and read stories and reviews for free at interzone.digital. Thanks for listening. See you next time.